Poor girl gives her last $8 to a hungry Hell's Angel. The next day 50 bikers changed her life. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And if you love powerful biker stories that touch the heart, hit subscribe, because today's story will stay with you long after it ends. Subscribe to Bikershype and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support is the fuel that keeps these stories alive. If you love Hell Angels, stay till the end. This one is for you. The $8 that changed a biker club. The afternoon sun hung low over the cracked asphalt parking lot of Miller's corner store, turning every oil stain into a tiny, shimmering mirage. The faded yellow parking lines peeled up from the ground like old tape, and weeds poked through the cracks. Stubborn and alive, 8-year-old Emma Chen stood at the edge of the lot, clutching her small purple backpack tight against her chest. The backpack had once been bright and new, decorated with cartoon kittens and tiny glittery stars. Now the color had faded, the fabric was fraying, and one of the zippers was broken, held together with a bent silver safety pin she'd found on the school bus floor. Inside her front pocket, folded so carefully it looked like a tiny paper treasure, was $8, 8 single-dollar bills. It had taken her 3 weeks to gather that money. 3 weeks of helping Mrs. Rodriguez next door water her garden and sweep her porch, collecting bottles and cans from the side of the road on her walk home from school and feeding them into the noisy recycling machine behind the supermarket, smiling shyly when Grandma Agnes slipped a quarter into her palm and whispered, "Don't tell the landlord I still have this," to someone else. $8 might not matter. To Emma, it felt like holding the key to a different kind of evening. The kind where her grandma didn't pretend she wasn't hungry. Her stomach growled as she pushed through the glass door of Miller's corner. The little bell above the frame jingled weakly, like it was tired of ringing for people who never had enough money anyway. Inside, the air smelled like old coffee, floor cleaner, and the faint sweetness of candy she could almost taste just by breathing deeply. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering in one corner. Emma's sneakers, once white, now grey and thin at the soles, scuffed softly against the linoleum as she walked down the first aisle. She hugged the backpack tighter. This was not just a shopping trip. This was a mission. She had a plan, a very careful plan. She stopped in front of the bread shelf and looked up at the price tags. Loaf of bread, $2, the cheap brand, the kind that got dry if you didn't eat it quick. Store brand peanut butter, $3.50. Milk, she'd checked last week. It was $2.50 for the smallest gallon. She did the math in her head again. Grandma had taught her. 2 for bread, $3.54. Peanut butter, that made $5.50. $2.54 milk, that would make $8. Perfect. Nothing left over. No room for mistakes. No room for candy. But in the back of her mind, like a tiny stubborn spark, there was still a hope. Maybe, just maybe, there would be some kind of discount or special. Maybe Mr. Miller would be in a good mood. Maybe there'd be a candy bar on sale for 50 cents that she could split with Grandma, just to celebrate having something more than canned soup and tap water. She reached a small hand toward the bread, fingers brushing the crinkly plastic. That's when she heard the voice. "Look, I'm telling you," a deep, rumbling voice said from the front of the store, frustration threading through every word. "I lost my wallet somewhere on the road. I just need something to eat. Anything. I can come back tomorrow and pay you double." Emma froze, her fingers still curled around the bread bag. Slowly, she pulled her hand back and peeked around the end of the aisle. Hiding behind a pyramid of dusty canned vegetables, at the counter stood a man who looked like he'd been carved out of stone and smoke and long, hard miles. He was huge, well over 6 feet, with shoulders so wide he seemed to take up half the front of the store. His arms were thick with muscle, tanned by sun, and inked with tattoos that wound up and around his skin like stories told without words. His hair, streaked with gray, hung past his shoulders, and a heavy beard covered half his face. He wore a black leather vest, the kind Emma had heard people call a cut. Patches with skulls, wings, and symbols she didn't understand were sewn across it. But there was one set of words she could read clearly, stitched in bold red letters across the back and echoed on a small patch near his chest. Hell's Angels. Name patch. BAR. Behind the counter stood Mr. Miller, the store owner, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous tilt to his shoulders. He was wringing his hands on a rag, looking torn. "No credit, no exceptions," he said, voice firm but uncomfortable. "You know the rules. If I do it once, everybody expects it. I'm sorry, I really am, but I can't. Bear let out a long, tired sigh. It wasn't the angry kind of sigh. It was the kind that sounded like it had traveled a long way, over a lot of broken roads. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time, Emma saw past the leather and the tattoos, and the patch that made grown adults cross the street. She saw the way his hand rested over his stomach, fingers pressing unconsciously. She saw the tremor in those fingers. She saw the hollow look in his eyes. She knew that look. She had seen it in the hallway mirror. She had seen it on Grandma's face when she thought Emma wasn't looking. It was the look of someone trying to pretend they weren't as hungry as they felt. I haven't eaten in 2 days, Bear said quietly. The fight drained out of his voice, leaving only exhaustion. My bike broke down about 20 miles back. I've been walking since yesterday afternoon. I just need something. A sandwich, a bag of chips, anything. Mr. Miller's expression softened. His grip on the rag loosened. For a moment, it looked like he might give in. Then he remembered his rules, his debts, his own worries. I'm sorry, he repeated, shaking his head. I really am, but I can't. Bear nodded once, slowly, in the kind of way a man does when he realizes the world isn't going to bend for him today. Yeah, he murmured. Figures. He turned toward the door, heavy boots thudding on the floor. He moved like someone carrying invisible weight on his shoulders, weight that had nothing to do with muscle. And as he walked past the end of Emma's aisle, their eyes met. Just for a second, hazel eyes, tired and surprised, crashed into big brown eyes, scared but steady. In that 1 second, something happened. Emma felt the crackling buzz of fear. He was so big, so rough, so everything she'd been taught to avoid. But underneath the fear, something else flickered. Recognition. He was hungry, really hungry. Just like Grandma, just like her. And in that heartbeat, Emma made a decision. Wait, she called out. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet store it rang clear. It stopped Bear mid-step. Mr. Miller's head jerked up. The humming lights, the old fridge, even the bell above the door seemed to pause. Emma stepped out from behind the canned corn display, her purple backpack sliding down one shoulder. Her heart hammered so hard she thought they might see it through her shirt. Bear turned slowly and looked down at her. From up close, he seemed even bigger. His presence filled her entire world, like standing in front of a moving mountain. But his eyes weren't mean, just surprised, tired, curious. Mr. Miller leaned over the counter. Emma, he called cautiously. Everything okay? Emma didn't answer him. Instead, she dug her hand into her pocket, feeling for the folded square of paper. Her fingers trembled for the first time. She pulled out the 8 single bills, the 3 weeks of small jobs and quiet sacrifices, and unfolded them carefully. She looked at the money, then at Bear, then at the memory of Grandma Agnes pretending. Her stomach wasn't growling. And then she held the money out for food, she said simply. Bear blinked once, twice. His gaze dropped to the money in her outstretched hand, then back to her face. Kid, he said, voice rough. I can't take your money. You're hungry. Emma answered, her tone as straightforward as math. My grandma says you always help hungry people if you can. Behind the counter, Mr. Miller stepped forward. Emma, he said gently, that's your money. You came in to buy groceries. Are you sure? Emma swallowed. Her stomach twisted, not just from hunger now, but from the weight of the choice. She thought of peanut butter spread thin on bread. She thought of milk for breakfast. She thought of Grandma's hands shaking as she pretended half a can of soup was enough. Then she looked at Bear's weathered face, at the beard, the scars, the patch that made the world judge him before they ever heard his voice. She nodded firmly and lifted the money a little higher. He needs it more than me, she said. We had soup yesterday, and bread. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. That's worse. Silence wrapped around the three of them again. Outside, a car drove by. Somewhere in the back of the store, the fridge compressor kicked in with a rattling thud. Bear crouched down slowly, joints creaking under his weight, until his eyes were almost level with hers. Not quite, but close. Up close, Emma could see the sunlines around his eyes, the tiny white scars on his knuckles, the way his beard was more silver than black now. What's your name, little one? He asked softly. Emma, she replied. Emma Chen. Emma Chen, he repeated like a promise. This money, it's important to you, isn't it? She nodded again. I was going to buy food for me and Grandma Agnes, she admitted. But we'll be okay. Grandma says God helps people who help others. She hesitated. And and she says sometimes you have to give even when it hurts. Something shifted in Bear's expression. The biker, the outlaw, the patch, those layers slipped back for a moment, and she saw the man beneath. His hazel eyes glistened. He took a slow breath, like he was steadying himself. Your grandma sounds like a smart woman, he murmured. She is, Emma said proudly. Bear stared at the $8. To anyone else it was just crumpled bills. To him, in that moment, it looked like a mirror held up to his own soul. A test he hadn't expected, delivered by a little girl with big eyes and worn-out sneakers. He reached out, careful and slow, and took the money from her small hand like it was made of glass. Thank you, Emma Chen, he said, his voice deeper, rougher. I won't forget this, not ever. You have my word on that. Emma's shoulders relaxed a little. She smiled, small, tired, but genuine smile that lit up her whole face. It's okay, she said. Grandma says when you help people, good things come back to you. Does she now? Bear replied, a hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. Emma. He stood back up, towering again, but somehow less scary now. Mr. Miller, Bear called, turning to the counter. Ring me up a sandwich, a bag of chips, and a bottle of water. He paused, eyeing the shelves. Then something flickered in his eyes, and he reached for more. He grabbed a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, a gallon of milk, 2 candy bars. He carried everything to the counter in his massive hands. These 2, he added, nodding toward the extra items, but put these under a separate total. Therefore Emma's eyes flew wide. No, she protested instantly, shooting forward. That's your food money. Bear shook his head. I only need enough to get my strength back and walk to the next town, he said. The rest is yours. You don't argue with the Hell's Angel, kid. We're stubborn as mules. Despite herself, Emma let out a small giggle. Even Mr. Miller smiled. The register beeped and clacked. $4 for the sandwich, chips, and water, Mr. Miller announced. $4 for the bread, peanut butter, milk, and candy bars. Even split. Bear nodded and handed the money over. Then he turned back to Emma. He picked up the grocery bag, meant for her a bag, that now held more than just food, and placed it gently in her small hands. You take care of your grandma, Emma Chen, he said, and you remember something. Okay, what? She asked. Sometimes, Bear said, his voice soft and oddly warm. Angels wear leather and ride motorcycles. Morning light filtered through thin, threadbare curtains, painting pale rectangles on the stained carpet. The apartment Emma shared with her grandmother, Agnes Chen, was on the second floor of a building that had once been new and hopeful, maybe 30 years ago. Now the paint was peeling. The hallway always smelled faintly of fried onions and cigarette smoke, and the staircase creaked like it was telling everyone's secrets. Inside apartment to be, Agnes stood at the tiny kitchen counter, twisting the lid of a jar of instant coffee with both hands. Her fingers, gnarled and swollen from arthritis, trembled with the effort. Come on, you stubborn thing, she muttered. The jar finally popped open with a soft click. Agnes let out a breath and smiled. A small victory at the start of another day. The coffee wasn't good coffee. It was the cheapest brand on the bottom shelf. It tasted like bitter burned rubber and regret, but it was warm, and it tricked her old bones into believing they had a little more energy than they really did. At the wobbly table, Emma sat swinging her legs, feet still not reaching the floor. She had a slice of bread on a chipped plate, carefully spreading peanut butter as thin as possible so the jar would last. The bag of groceries from yesterday sat open on the counter like a treasure chest. Bread, milk, peanut butter, 2 candy bars. It had turned their tiny kitchen into something that almost felt like a feast. You have school today, sweetheart, Agnes said, as she stirred her coffee with a spoon that had lost most of its shine. You finish your homework? Yes, Grandma, Emma replied. She licked a little peanut butter from the knife and wiped it on the edge of her plate. Grandma, yes, baby. Do you think that man from yesterday is okay? Emma asked, eyes serious. The biker. Agnes turned slowly. Lines in her weathered face deepened a little. The biker, she repeated. I'm sure he is. Thanks to you. She moved closer, one hand pressed to her lower back to steady herself. That was a very kind thing you did, Emma. Your grandfather would have been proud. You're not mad I didn't bring home all the food? Emma asked quietly. She fixed her gaze on the toast, afraid to look up and see disappointment. Oh, honey. Agnes crossed the small space between them and cupped Emma's face in her cool, fragile hands. I could never be mad at you for having a good heart. Never. But we don't have much, Emma whispered. What if, listen to me, Agnes said gently but firmly. This world is full of people who only think of themselves. You're not one of them. You saw someone hungry, and you helped. That is worth more than any jar of peanut butter. Emma's throat tightened. She nodded. They both paused as a faint sound drifted in through the thin window glass, a low, distant rumbling. It started as a tremor under the city noise. Then it grew louder and louder. Emma frowned. Grandma, what's that? Agnes assumed it was construction or a truck. Probably just the sound deepened, multiplied, turned into a roar that filled the street. Emma shoved her chair back. It scraped loudly on the floor. She ran to the window, stood on tiptoe, and pressed her nose to the glass. Her eyes went huge. Grandma, she whispered. Grandma, come here, quick. Agnes shuffled over, expecting maybe one motorcycle, maybe two. What she saw instead made her heart stutter. The street below was filling with motorcycles. Not one, not two, dozens. HARLEYS lined up along the curb like a chrome army. Engines rumbled and idled like caged thunder. The morning sun bounced off polished metal and black helmets. Men and women climbed off their bikes, their movements calm, practiced. Leather vests cut-scored the light. Some were young and wiry, others older with bellies and grey beards, but all of them moved with the same quiet certainty, the same unspoken unity. On nearly every back patch, Emma saw the same emblem, a winged skull, the name stitched like a warning and a promise, Hell's Angels. Some neighbors peeked through blinds or cracked doors open a few inches. A few people hurried past on the sidewalk, eyes down, wanting no part of whatever this was. At the front of the group, standing beside a gleaming black Harley with red pinstriping, was a man Emma recognized. Bear. He had cleaned up a bit. His hair was pulled back into a loose tie. His beard was combed. His cut was still worn, but he stood straighter now, no longer bent by hunger, and he was looking up. Right at their window. As their eyes met, he smiled. Emma's heart did something strange in her chest, a flip, a leap, a tiny burst of something halfway between fear and joy. Oh my, Agnes breathed. Emma, what did you do? Before Emma could attempt an answer, there was a heavy knock at the apartment door. 3 firm raps, not aggressive, but not timid either. Agnes and Emma looked at each other. Agnes took a breath, patted Emma's shoulder, and walked carefully to the door. Her fingers hovered over the knob for a moment. She opened it. The narrow hallway outside was suddenly filled with leather and denim and patches and boots. The air smelled like motor oil, soap, and the faint smoky scent of the road. Bear stood at the front, filling the doorway. Behind him, bikers stretched down the hall, some leaning casually on the wall, others holding boxes, bags, and tool cases. Mrs. Chen, Bear asked politely. Agnes straightened her back as much as she could. Yes, she said. I'm Agnes Chen. Can I help you? Bear's face softened. His voice dropped low. Respectful, ma'am, he said. Your granddaughter did something for me yesterday that I'll never forget. She gave me her last $8 when I was hungry and desperate. She didn't hesitate for a second. Didn't care who I was or what patch I wore. She just saw a man who needed help. Agnes's eyes filled with tears. She turned her head, looking at Emma, who had stepped into the doorway beside her, her small frame almost disappearing next to Bear's. Agnes began, voice trembling. We don't have much. She shouldn't have. She did exactly what someone with a good heart does. Bear interrupted gently. And in our world, that matters. A woman stepped forward from behind Bear. She was in her 50s, with silver streaks in her dark hair and warm brown eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She wore her own leather cut, patches worn soft at the edges. My name's Sandra, she said, giving Agnes a kind smile. I'm Bear's old lady. She dipped her head toward the living room behind them. May we come in? Sandra asked. We have some things to discuss. Agnes hesitated only a second, then she stepped back. Yes, she said. Please, come in. Bear ducked slightly to step through the doorway, though he didn't need to. Habit, maybe. He moved carefully, like he was afraid of breaking something. Sandra followed. Then a handful of other bikers, older men with officer patches, a woman with a secretary rocker, a tall, quiet man with SGTA terms stitched beneath his name. The rest stayed in the hall, respectful of the cramped space. Inside, Bear's gaze swept the apartment. He noticed the space heater in the corner, an old one, humming softly because the central heating clearly didn't work. He saw the bucket under the bathroom ceiling where water slowly dripped. He saw the wobble in the table legs, the nearly empty pantry visible through the cracked cupboard door. This wasn't poverty in a movie. This was real, the kind that smelled like damp and dust and worry. Mrs. Chen Bear said softly, "When was the last time you and Emma had a proper meal? Not just canned soup or toast, a real meal." Agnes lifted her chin. Pride flickered in her eyes. "We manage," she said. "That's not what I asked," Bear replied gently. The fight drained out of her shoulders. She sighed. "A few weeks," she admitted, "but we get by. I have my social security check. It's just the bills, the landlord, medicine. Things break. Things cost. You know how it is." Bear nodded slowly. He did know how it was. He'd grown up in trailer parks and cheap motels. He'd seen cupboards with nothing but salt and hot sauce. He'd watched his own mama pretend not to be hungry. He turned toward the doorway. "Tommy, Marco," he called, his voice deeper now. "Start bringing it up." Emma's eyes widened. "Bringing what up?" she asked. Sandra knelt down beside her, the leather of her vest creaking. "Honey," she said, "we took up a collection, the whole charter, and then some of the other chapters when they heard the story. Everyone wanted to help the little girl with the big heart who gave her last $8 to a hungry stranger." Over the next hour, Emma felt like she was watching a dream, only it was better than a dream, because it was real. Bikers filed in and out of the apartment, like a work crew from heaven's roughest neighborhood. First came the food, boxes and bags and crates, fresh vegetables in bright colors she hadn't seen in months, fruits, apples, oranges, bananas, grapes, packs of chicken and beef, rice and pasta, canned soup, tuna beans, cereal with cartoon mascots, milk, eggs, cheese, butter, even treats, cookies, juice, packets of hot cocoa. They filled every inch of counter space. They stacked boxes along the walls because there was no more room on the table. Emma's eyes kept bouncing from one box to another like she was afraid they might vanish if she blinked. Then came the fixes. A biker named Grisser, tall man with hands stained permanently with engine oil, examined the radiator, the heater, the stove. Within 20 minutes, the bathroom leak was patched. The heat came on with a loud cough, then settled into a steady warm hum. Light bulbs were replaced. The wobbly table legs were tightened. A new lock was installed on the door. A young prospect, no officer patch yet. Just the bottom rocker went downstairs to talk to the landlord. He came back up, eyes blazing with quiet satisfaction. "Rent's paid for the next 6 months, he reported. "Anonymous donation." Landlord almost fainted. Agnes had to sit down. Her legs shook. Sandra sat beside her, taking her hand. "There's more," Bear said, lowering himself into the apartment's only armchair. The chair creaked under his weight like it wasn't sure it was ready for this kind of responsibility. He reached into his cut and pulled out a thick white envelope. "The club raised some money," he said. "It's not a fortune, but it should help with bills. Maybe get Emma some new clothes. Fix what needs fixing long term." Agnes opened the envelope with trembling fingers. A stack of bills stared back at her. Hundreds, some 50s, a few 20s. That's over $3,000, she whispered. I can't accept this. It's too much." "You can," Bear said. "And you will." His voice was firm now, the tone of a man used to being obeyed, but there was warmth in it. "Emma gave me $8 when she had nothing," he continued. "This doesn't come close to repaying that kind of compassion. Besides," a crooked smile tugged one corner of his mouth, "you try refusing a gift from 50 Hells Angels. See how far that gets you." Despite the tears streaming down her cheeks, Agnes laughed. It came out shaky, but it was real. Emma, overwhelmed, climbed into her grandmother's lap, and the two of them held on to each other as if the room might disappear if they let go. But the angels weren't done. A biker named Doc, who actually was a retired physician, knelt beside Agnes and gently examined her hands, her knees, her back. He listened as she talked about the pain, the stiffness, the nights she couldn't sleep. "I'll get you on some proper medication," he said. "No charge. I know a clinic. We'll handle it." A woman named Rita, with kind eyes and a patch that read childcare, crouched in front of Emma. "You like kids?" Rita asked softly. "I run a daycare. If your grandma ever needs help, if she's sick, has an appointment, or just needs a break, you come to me." "Okay, no cost. Your family now?" Emma nodded, stunned. Another member, broad shoulders, construction company logo tattooed on his forearm. Promised to come back on the weekend with a small crew to fix up more things properly. Paint, cracks in the wall, maybe a new cabinet or two. Agnes wiped her eyes. I don't understand, she said, voice almost a whisper. Why would you do all this? For us. We're nobody. Bear leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because your granddaughter, he said, saw past the leather, past the patch, past the rumors and the headlines. She saw a hungry man, and she helped. Most folks cross the street when they see us. She walked toward me. He looked at Emma, his gaze steady and full of something deep and almost painful. In our world, he said, we have a code. We take care of our own. And anyone who shows us that kind of heart. He nodded toward Emma. They're ours now. Sandra squeezed Anis's hand. Emma gave from her poverty. She said softly, that's the purest kind of kindness. As the work wound down, the apartment looked different, warmer, fuller, lived in, hopeful. Boxes of food lined one wall. A new curtain rod held up fresh curtains someone had brought. The heater radiated quiet warmth. The bucket in the bathroom sat empty and dry. The bikers began to gather their tools, their spare parts. Their empty coffee cups. Will check in on you. Rita promised Emma. You call if the landlord gives you any trouble, Grease added. Doc patted Agnes's shoulder. I'll swing by tomorrow with the meds. One by one, they filtered out, each leaving a smile, a nod, or a gentle word in their wake. Finally, only Bear and Sandra remained. Bear reached into his cut one more time and pulled something out. A small cloth patch, same shape as the Hells Angels emblem, but smaller. White background, red border, across the top, in bold letters. It said, Honorary Angel. Beneath it, embroidered in careful black stitching, Emma. Emma stared at it like it was made of gold. This, Bear said, holding it out to her, isn't an official club patch. You can't ride with us, he added with a wink, but it means something. To us. He pressed it into her hand. You're one of us now, he said. Family. You ever need anything, you call. He pulled a small card from his pocket and placed it beside the patch. It had a phone number and the words Ridge County Charter on it. Anytime, day or night, ask for Bear. Emma's fingers closed around the patch. She swallowed hard. Thank you, she whispered. No, Bear said. Thank you. He stood, the chair squeaking as if in relief, and walked to the door. Sandra hugged Agnes gently. Then Emma. Take care of that big softy, she whispered, nodding toward Bear. He pretends he's tough. I heard that, Bear grumbled, but his eyes were smiling. They stepped into the hallway. Will I see you again? Emma blurted from the doorway. Bear turned back. Their eyes met one more time. Maybe, he said. World's a small place sometimes, but whether I'm here or not, remember what I told you. She nodded. Sometimes angels wear leather and ride motorcycles. That's right, Bear said. And with that, he walked down the hall, boots echoing softly, then disappeared down the stairs. A minute later, the engines roared to life outside. The building vibrated with the sound. Then, slowly, it grew fainter as they rode away. Emma and Agnes stood at the window watching the long line of bikes disappear around the corner. The street fell quiet again, but something had changed forever. The weeks that followed didn't magically erase every problem in Emma's life. There were still bills. There were still hard days. There were still moments where Agnes's hands ached so much she had to sit down halfway through making dinner. But things were different now. The food meant Emma never went to bed hungry. The medication from Doc meant Agnes could move more easily, sleep better, even laugh without wincing. The paid rent meant the landlord's threats stopped. He even started fixing things himself, careful and polite, like he'd learned not to mess with whoever had stepped in on their behalf. Rita stopped by almost every week. Sometimes she brought coloring books or second-hand clothes for Emma. Sometimes she just sat with Agnes and talked. Two women on opposite sides of life's highway finding common ground. Every few days, groceries appeared on their doorstep. Not in overwhelming amounts anymore, just enough to show they weren't forgotten. A bag of oranges, a carton of eggs, a note that said, "Hope you're doing okay. RC Angels once." Emma opened the door to find a brand new pair of sneakers sitting there. They were simple, sturdy, and just her size. No note. She didn't need one. At school, Emma started raising her hand more. She answered questions with quiet confidence. When her teacher asked the class to write about someone who helped you, she wrote about a hungry biker and a street full of motorcycles. She didn't used the words Hell's Angels. She knew how other adults reacted to that name. Instead, she wrote, "Sometimes the people who look the scariest are the ones who show up when you need them most." Her teacher read the story twice, then looked at Emma in a new way. Far from Emma's neighborhood, in a clubhouse on the edge of town, Bear sat at a scarred wooden table surrounded by his brothers and sisters. The Hells Angels Ridge County Charter, a neon sign buzzed near the door. Old rock played softly from a dusty jukebox in the corner. The walls were covered in framed photographs, rides, charity runs, club portraits. In most of them, Bear was somewhere in the back, half smiling, arms crossed. A fresh picture hung on the wall now. It was of Bear kneeling in a tiny apartment, handing a grocery bag to a small girl with big eyes and a purple backpack. "Can't believe that kid gave you her last $8, Grease muttered, shaking his head. "When's the last time anyone did something like that without wanting anything back?" "Never," Bear said quietly. He turned his beer bottle slowly between his fingers. He wasn't drinking tonight, just thinking. Sandra sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee. "You thinking about her again?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Bear nodded. "Yeah," he said, "and about other stuff." Sandra squeezed his knee. "Say it," she urged softly. Bear stared at the bottle. "I had a daughter once." He said the words heavy, like they'd rusted inside him. "Before I patched in, before I became Bear. Back when I was just Bobby Naiman from the wrong side of town." A few of the older members glanced up. They'd heard the pieces of this story before, but Bear rarely talked about it. "I wasn't there for her," he admitted. "Too much drinking, too much running, too much proving I was tough." His jaw tightened. "By the time I got my head on straight, her mama was gone with some other guy. Took my little girl. I don't even know where she is now. Don't know if she hates me. Don't know if she's okay." He swallowed. "When Emma handed me that money," he said, "for a second, I saw what my little girl might have been like if I hadn't screwed everything up. Brave, kind, smart, not afraid to help someone the world tells her to fear." Sandra leaned her shoulder into his. "You can't fix the past," she said, "but you can choose what kind of man you are now." He nodded. "That's what this is about," he said. "We're not saints. We've done things, seen things. But when someone like Emma looks at us and sees a human being worth helping," he shook his head, "we better damn well live up to that." The room fell quiet for a moment. Then the sergeant-at-arms spoke. "So we keep checking in," he said. "We watch her back. We watch her grandma's back. They're on our list now." "Our list?" a younger prospect asked. The older biker gave him a slow, patient look. "People we owe," he said. "People we protect. People who remind us we're more than the patches on our backs." Bear looked up at the photo of Emma on the wall. "In my book," he said quietly, "that little girl outranks all of us." Months passed. Winter rolled in hard, with icy winds that howled through broken windows and punished anyone who didn't have somewhere warm to go. Thanks to the angels, Emma and Agnes did. One night, though the past tried to claw its way back in, it was late past midnight. The building was quiet. The heater clicked and hummed. Agnes slept in her room, breathing softly. Emma lay awake, staring at the honorary angel patch pinned above her tiny makeshift desk. Moonlight caught the red stitching. That's when she heard the shouting dot at first. She thought it was the TV from the neighbor's apartment. Then the words became clear. "Open up. I know you're in there, Agnes." A man's voice. Loud, slurred. Emma's stomach turned cold. She slid out of bed and padded to the door of her room. Peeking through the cracked dot, the hallway light under the front door flickered as a shadow passed in front of it. Something heavy hit the door with a dull thud. "I said, open up." Agnes woke with a gasp, the sound of her name cutting through sleep like a knife. She shuffled out of her room, clutching her robe. Emma watched her face go pale when she heard the voice again. "Is that Emma?" whispered. Agnes's lips thinned. "It's your mother's old boyfriend," she said quietly. "He thinks we still have money she owed him. I hoped he'd forgotten about us." Another slam rattled the door. "Rent's paid now, isn't it?" The man shouted. "You think I don't hear things? You think I don't know you?" Suddenly came into cash. Agnes stiffened. Emma's heart pounded. "Grandma, what do we do?" she whispered. Agnes took a breath. "We stay quiet," she said. "We wait. He'll go away." Another slam. "Come on," the man snarled. "I just want to talk." Something in his tone made it clear. Talking wasn't the only thing on his mind. Emma ran back to her room. Her hands shook as she grabbed the card. Bear had given her the one with the phone number and the words Ridge County Charter. She'd never used it. She'd kept it like a talisman, something that meant she wasn't alone. Even if she never called, tonight, she called. Her fingers fumbled over the digits on the old cell phone Grandma kept for emergencies. She pressed call and pressed it to her ear, praying someone would answer. 1 ring 2 3. Yeah, a familiar rough voice answered. Bear, it's Emma, she whispered. Instantly, his tone changed. Emma, you okay? What's wrong? There's a man at our door, she said, voice shaking. He's yelling at Grandma. He wants money. He sounds bad. In the background she could hear engines, voices. It sounded like the clubhouse. Bear's voice cut through firmly. Is the door locked? He asked. Yes. Good. Don't open it, he said. You hear me, kid? Do not open it. Stay away from the door. Go sit with your grandma in the back room. I'm on my way. But no buts, he said. You called family. That means we handle it. The man pounded on the door again. Louder now. Emma's throat closed. She ran back to Agnes and grabbed her hand. Let's go to your room, she said. Now, Agnes hesitated. She looked at the door, at Emma, at the phone in her hand. Who did you call, baby? She asked. Emma lifted her chin a little. Family, she said. The man outside was getting more aggressive. I know you're in there, Agnes, he yelled. Don't make me kick this door in. He slammed his shoulder against the wood. The frame shuddered. Emma flinched. Is he going to get in? She whispered. Agnes forced a calm she didn't feel. No, she said. The lock is new. They installed it. Remember, it'll hold. But even as she said it, another impact shook the door. Then through the shouting and pounding, another sound rose up. In the distance at first, then closer. The low, rolling thunder of motorcycles. Engines. Multiple, growing louder with every second. The man at the door paused. What the The engines pulled up in front of the building. Doors opened. Heavy footsteps hit the sidewalk. Voices rumbled through the floorboards. Someone started up the stairs. Many SOMEONES. The man outside their door stepped back. What the hell is this? He muttered. Boots thudded down the hallway. The light under the door darkened as shadows gathered outside. The pounding on the apartment door stopped. A new knock sounded. Firm, controlled. Agnes, it's Bear. You okay in there? Came the low voice. Agnes's knees nearly gave out. Emma held her up. We're okay, Agnes called back, voice shaking. But he's still out here. A different voice spoke now, calm, but with an edge. Which one? It asked. The one who was just about to break in, Bear replied. The man outside blustered. Hey, I don't know who you people think you are, but this is none of your something. In the air shifted. Emma couldn't see what happened, but she could feel it. The voice of the sergeant-at-arms cut through, cold and razor-sharp. It became our business, he said. The second you started threatening our family. Footsteps shifted. The man stumbled back. I just wanted to talk, he said. The bravado was gone. She owes me. Her daughter owes me. Her daughter is gone, Bear said. And you don't come here pounding on the door of an old woman and an 8-year-old girl. Not in our town. Not ever. I didn't know she had friends, the man muttered. You know now, someone else said. A murmur of agreement rippled behind him. Emma could picture it. Bear standing between the door and the man. A line of bikers in leather behind him. A wall no one wanted to climb. We're going to make something real clear, Bear said quietly. You're going to walk away from this building. You're going to walk away from Agnes and Emma. You're not going to bother them again. Not for money. Not for anything. You understand me? Silence. Then the man tried again. That money is gone, Bear snapped. Like your chances of walking out of here with any respect if you keep pushing this. A beat. Then. Footsteps. Rapid. Retreating. The man's voice, smaller now, echoed down the stairs. Fine. Whatever. I'm done with this. The front door below slammed. No footsteps came back. The hallway grew quiet. Bear knocked gently again. It's okay now, he said. He's gone. Agnes opened the door. Bear stood there, flanked by 3 bikers. Behind them, more waited by the stairwell, silent and watchful. Sorry for the dramatic entrance, Bear said. But when an angel gets a call from family, we don't arrive in a Prius. Despite everything, Agnes laughed, one hand pressed to her chest. Emma stepped forward and hugged Bear around the waist without thinking. Thank you, she whispered into his cut. He patted her back with that same surprising gentleness. That's What family is for, he said. The night they chased off the man from Annis's past became just another story added to the growing pile of proof that Emma and her grandma were no longer alone. From then on, the building's atmosphere shifted. The landlord treated Agnes with respect. The neighbors looked at Emma differently. They still whispered when the tall bikers occasionally stopped by with groceries or to fix a broken step. But the whispers started to sound more like, "Those guys. They're trouble, but they're good trouble. Did you see how they helped old Mrs. Chen? I heard they paid her rent. Maybe they're not what everyone says." One Sunday afternoon, Bear and Sandra invited Emma and Agnes to a club barbecue at a rural lot outside town. Rosy-cheeked kids ran round between bikes, playing tag and climbing on old tires. Wives and girlfriends tended grills, laughing and bickering like sisters. Big men in cuts sat on picnic benches, sharing stories and arguing about music and oil brands. Emma had never seen bikers like this. She'd seen them on TV, in movies always portrayed as villains, criminals, walking threats. Here, she saw a man with a treasurer patch carefully cutting a hamburger in half for his toddler. A biker named Tank patiently braiding his daughter's hair with massive hands that could probably snap a wrench in two. Rita chasing a pack of kids with a water gun, her laughter louder than the engines. Sandra laughed when Emma's eyes went wide. "What did you expect?" she asked. "Demons. I don't know," Emma admitted. "I thought you'd be scarier." "We can be," Grease said, walking by with a plate stacked high with ribs. He winked. "Just not at family cookouts." Bear called Emma over and lifted her onto the seat of his bike. "Careful," he said. "This one bites." She ran her fingers over the chrome, mesmerized. "Do you really ride these all over the country?" she asked. "All over," he replied. "Highways, deserts, mountains, sometimes just to feel the road, sometimes for charity runs, sometimes to go help someone who needs us, like us," she said. He nodded. "Like you." She looked up at him. "Do you think?" She hesitated. "Do you think my mum might ever come back?" The question hung between them. Fragile. Bear didn't lie. "I don't know, kid," he said softly. "Some people get lost out there and never find their way back. But whether she does or not, you got a whole crew watching out for you now." Emma swallowed and nodded. "Okay," she said. He reached up and tapped the honorary angel patch sheet, pinned to her shirt for the event. "You earned that," he said. "You remember why?" "Because I gave you $8, she said. "Not just that," Bear corrected gently. "Because you gave it when you didn't have much. Because you saw past everything on the outside and decided to help anyway. That's rare. Don't ever lose that." "I won't," she said. Years from now, Emma would look back on that season of her life as the time when everything quietly shifted. Her mother never came back. That wound never fully healed. Some nights, she still lay awake wondering why she wasn't enough to stay for, but the ache was cushioned by new memories. Bear showing up at her school talent show, sitting in the back row with his massive arms crossed, pretending not to tear up when she played the piano. Sandra helping her pick out a dress for her first middle school dance. Gris teaching her how to change a tire so no guy ever leaves you stranded. Rita letting her volunteer at the daycare, where Emma discovered she loved working with children. Agnes's health improved with Doc's help, but time still marched on. That couldn't be stopped. What could be changed was how alone she felt in her last years. She didn't feel alone at all. When Agnes passed quietly one spring morning, the funeral home parking lot filled with motorcycles, engines idled like low thunder. Neighbors watched from windows as a long line of angels stood in respectful silence. Heads bowed as Bear spoke about a woman who'd taught a little girl to give, even when it hurt. Agnes Chen told her granddaughter to always help hungry people. If she could, Bear said, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. Because of that, she changed a lot more lives than she ever knew. Afterwards, when the casket was lowered and the last prayer had been said, Emma found herself standing between Bear and Sandra, leaning into the comfort of their presence. "What now?" she asked quietly. Bear looked down at her. "What do you want now?" he asked. Emma thought of kitchens with empty shelves, of kids who went to school with hollow eyes, of the way it felt to hold $8 and decide that someone else's hunger mattered more than your own. "I want to do what Grandma did," she said, "and what you did. I want to help people who feel invisible." Sandra smiled through her tears. "I think," she said, "you're already doing that." As she grew older, Emma carried the story of the $8 with her like a compass. In high school, when she got a part-time job at a diner, she'd quietly slide a plate of food in front of someone who looked like they hadn't eaten in days. If they couldn't pay, she'd cover it from her tip slot in college thanks to scholarships, odd jobs, and a little help from the angels. She studied social work. She volunteered at shelters. She listened to people's stories without judgment. Whenever she saw someone who looked the way Bear had that day in Miller's corner store, tired, hungry, worn down, and invisible, she remembered the feeling of that crumpled $8 in her hand. She started calling it the $8 rule in her head. If she had something to give, time, money, food, a kind word, and it hurt just a little to give it, that meant she probably should. One afternoon, years later, she walked past a small corner grocery in a different town, a different state. The bell above the door jingled exactly the same way as Miller's had. A big man in a leather cut stood at the counter, arguing quietly with the clerk, hands spread in apology. Her heart skipped. For a second, she was 8 years old again. She walked up, pulled a crumpled bill from her pocket, more than 8 this time, and held it out. For food, she said. The man turned, his eyes widened. Kid, I can't take you're hungry, she replied softly. Someone once told me you always help hungry people if you can. The man hesitated, then took the money, eyes shining. Thank you, he said. I won't forget this. Emma smiled. I know, she said. She stepped out into the sunlight, and for a brief moment, she could almost hear the rumble of motorcycles in the distance, even though the street was quiet. She touched the inside of her jacket where a small faded patch was sewn into the lining. Honorary angel Emma sometimes, she whispered to herself. Angels wear leather. Maybe the world didn't change overnight because of one little girl and $8, but it changed around her. It changed for a hungry biker who remembered what it felt like to be seen as more than his patch. It changed for an old grandmother who realized she wouldn't face her final years alone. It changed for a biker club that remembered the power of being the kind of men and women someone would trust with their last crumpled bills. And it changed for every person whose life was quietly touched by the ripples of one small act of kindness. All because an 8-year-old girl walked into a corner store with a plan for groceries, saw a hungry stranger, and decided, he needs it more than me. If this story touched your heart, take a second right now, like this video, subscribe to Bikershype, share this story with your friends, comment your name below. Your name might become the next main character in one of our stories. And if you truly love Hell Angels, then prove your love. Share this video everywhere and help us reach our 1,000 subscribers target. Your one click is like that $8. It looks small, but it can change everything.